Hey everybody, welcome back. We're continuing our reading of this wonderful book, which has a lot of the stories of the Native American tribes of America, the indigenous peoples, the Indians, the natives, the chieftains, the awesome hunters, and everyone else. So this is from the Serrano tribe, and it's titled The Land of the Dead. Look at that. Alright, now this is not an exhaustive compilation of all their authentic stories, because they had the oral tradition, so not everything was written down. But we have a little nugget here, and let's begin. A great hunter brought home a wife. They loved each other and were very happy, but the man's mother hated the young wife, and one day, when the husband was out hunting, she put a sharp pointed object in the wife's seat, and the woman sat down upon it and was killed. Well, that sounds like a pretty mean mother-in-law. The people immediately brought brush and piled it up. They put her body on it and burned it, and by the time her husband returned that night, the body was all consumed. Dang, so he left, and all comes back to a burnt wife. The man went to the burning place and stayed there motionless. Curls of dust rose and whirled about the charred spot. He watched them all night and day. At evening they grew larger, and at last one larger than all the rest whirled around and around the burnt spot. So he's just there motionless, so he's struck. Clearly then, he must like her, but if the dust is rising, sounds like a little mini type of ash tornado, right? It set off down the road and he set off after it. Okay, so it's like moving, and he's going after. When it was quite dark, he saw that the dust was falling with his wife, but she would not speak to him. Okay, so he sees it and he realizes, like, hey, this was my wife, and it's not talking to him. She was leading him in the direction of the rock, past which all dead people go. If they have lived bad lives, the rock falls on them and crushes them. When they came to it, she spoke to her husband. "We are going to the place of dead people," she told him. "I will take you on my back so that you will not be seen and recognized as one of the living." Well, this is freaky. Why would she want to take him there? So, you go past a rock, it'll crush you. But if you're dead, how does that affect you? What happens if they recognize him as the dead, though? They attack him? What's gonna happen? Thus they traveled on until they came to the river that the dead have to ford. Aha! Look, there's a river story here. The river story of a dead river. In the Greek mythology, they have some of that too. This was what is that river called in Hades? Starts with the P. I don't remember. This was very dangerous for the man because he was not dead. But the woman kept him on her back, and they came through safely. That's kind of funny, a man being on his wife's back. It's a little weird. The woman went directly to her people, to her parents and brothers and sisters who had died before. They were glad to see her, but they did not like the man, for he was not dead. So the dead not liking the living. That's interesting. And she's all happy, reunited, and they're like, who's this chap? The woman pleaded for him, however, and they let him stay. Special food always had to be cooked for him, because he could not eat what dead people live on. Now this is interesting. So in their Native American lore, the dead were able to cook, even though it's like a story that you would tell, around the campfire and such. It's still quite interesting that within their folktale, the dead preparing food for the living is interesting, especially when there's traditions in Mexico of the living making food for the dead. It's interesting. And in the daytime, he could see nothing. It was as if he were alone all day long. Only in the night did he see his wife and other people. Okay, so the only in the nighttime will he be able to see this sort of whirlwind illusion of his wife, his dead wife. Dang, and the mom doesn't even feel bad. Her son, if the mom saw this and she sees her son going chasing the shadow of his wife that she took out, it's amazing how she don't feel guilty even within the story, the fantasy story, right? When the dead were going hunting, they took him along and stationed him on the trail the deer would take. Presently he heard them shouting, "The deer, the deer!" And he knew they were shouting to him that the deer were coming in his direction. But he could see nothing. Then he looked again and spotted 2 little black beetles, which he knocked over. When all the people had come up, They praised him for his hunting. So the deer, that's weird. They're hunting. They're ghosts and they're hunting. Remember in the other story there was the ghosts were smoking ghost smoke and they were playing jokes. Here they're hunting. What do the beetles have to do with it? After that the dead did not complain about his presence, but they did feel sorry for him. It's not time for him to die yet, they said. He has a hard time here. The woman ought to go back with him. So they arranged for both of them to return, and they instructed the man and the woman to have nothing to do with each other for 3 nights after they were back on Earth. Okay, so they feel pity for him. That's interesting. They feel pity for him, like, oh, look at him. He's like, wants to stay here. He loves his wife so much. He don't want to go back to the world of the living. It's hard for him to be around all the dead. And we're going to make her go back with him on condition that he doesn't copulate with her for 3 nights. 3 nights for the dead, however, meant 3 years for the living. Ah, there it is. There's the caveat. Not aware of this, the husband and wife returned to Earth and remained continent for 3 nights. The following evening they embraced, and when the husband woke on the morning of the 4th day, he was alone. From a story reported by Ruth Benedict in 1926. Oh, that's sad. So he didn't know the time for the dead was different than the time for the living in the story. And they did for 3 days, and then he probably got so happy, like, I finally have her back, and then she returns back to that domain, and he's still there. That's sad. He loved her that much. The mother, interesting, she doesn't come back up. And if I was to add to that story, I would have put something about the mom, because what a mean mother-in-law. Caused her own son that type of anguish. Very sad.